A grieving widow adopted a stray cat, unaware it held the key to her late husband's hidden fortune. The thought would have made Eleanor Matthews laugh if she had any laughter left in her. 3 months after burying Richard, her husband of 38 years, Eleanor's world had shrunk to the size of their Victorian home on Maple Street, a home now filled with nothing but echoes and dust motes dancing in shafts of sunlight she no longer felt. The November rain tapped against the windows like impatient fingers as Eleanor sat in Richard's leather armchair, still molded to the shape of his body. She hadn't meant to sit there, had actively avoided it for 12 weeks and 4 days, but exhaustion had pulled her down after another sleepless night. The chair still smelled faintly of his sandalwood cologne. Eleanor closed her eyes, breathing in deeply, pretending for just a moment that he had simply stepped out to the garden. Richard had been gone since that sunny August morning when his heart had simply stopped while tending to his prized roses. No warning, no goodbye, no chance to say all the things that now festered in Eleanor's chest. Just the cruel efficiency of death, snatching away 4 decades of shared dreams. Their daughter, Olivia, called every day from Seattle, her voice tight with worry. "Mom, maybe you should get some help around the house. Or consider moving closer to us." "I'm fine," Eleanor would say, the lie so practiced it almost sounded true. "Just need more time." But time wasn't healing. It was merely accumulating, heavy and stagnant like the stack of unopened mail on the hallway table. Bills, condolence cards, a notice from Richard's investment firm, all of it simply too much to face. Eleanor had withdrawn from the garden club, the library volunteer program, even Sunday services at the church where she and Richard had exchanged vows all those years ago. On this particular rain-soaked evening, the doorbell rang, startling Eleanor from her half-sleep in Richard's chair. She almost didn't answer it. Social interactions required energy she simply didn't have. The bell rang again, more insistent, and with a sigh that seemed to come from her very bones, Eleanor pulled herself up. Through the beveled glass of the front door, the distorted shape of Mrs. Abernathy from next door waited on the porch. Eleanor smoothed her cardigan, the same one she'd worn yesterday and possibly the day before, and opened the door. "Eleanor, dear, I'm sorry to bother you," Mrs. Abernathy said, her usually immaculate silver hair damp from the rain. In her arms was a bundle of wet fur. "This little one has been hanging around my garden for days. I'd take him in, but Herbert's allergies, well, you know how he gets. I thought perhaps—" Eleanor stared at the bedraggled creature. The cat, a gray tabby with white paws and an ear that looked like something had taken a bite out of it, stared back with eyes the color of copper pennies. "I don't need a cat, Mildred," Eleanor said, even as the animal gave a pathetic mewl that seemed to vibrate something long dormant inside her chest. "Of course, dear. I just thought Richard always did like cats, didn't he?" Mrs. Abernathy's voice was gentle, tentative, as though she wasn't sure if mentioning Richard was allowed. Eleanor's hand tightened on the doorknob. Richard had indeed loved cats. They'd had 3 during their marriage, the last one passing a few years back. Richard had suggested getting another, but Eleanor had demurred. Too much responsibility at their age, she'd said. Now she wondered if she'd denied him that small joy in his final years. "Just for tonight, perhaps," Mrs. Abernathy pressed, holding out the damp bundle. "The weather report says it's going to drop below freezing." Before Eleanor could form another refusal, the cat leaped from Mrs. Abernathy's arms and darted past Eleanor's legs into the house. "Well," Mrs. Abernathy said with a small smile, "it seems he's made up his mind." After Mrs. Abernathy left, Eleanor found the cat sitting in the middle of the kitchen floor, looking expectantly at her as though he'd lived there all his life. "This is temporary," Eleanor told the cat firmly, "just until the storm passes." The cat blinked slowly, then began to groom his still damp fur. Eleanor sighed and opened the refrigerator. There wasn't much inside. She'd lost interest in cooking for one, but she found some leftover chicken, which she shredded onto a saucer. The cat approached cautiously, sniffed the offering, then began to eat with delicate precision. "You have manners, at least," Eleanor observed. "Richard would appreciate that." That night, for the first time since the funeral, Eleanor slept through until morning. She woke to find the cat curled against her side, a small furnace of warmth in the too large bed. For a brief, disorienting moment, she felt a flicker of something that might have been comfort. Over the next few days, a routine of sorts developed. The cat, whom Eleanor stubbornly refused to name, still insisting this arrangement was temporary, would wake her with a gentle paw to the cheek when the first light of dawn filtered through the curtains. Eleanor would feed him, then make herself a cup of tea, something she'd often skipped in the foggy mornings after Richard's death. On the fourth day, the cat knocked a framed photograph from the sideboard. Eleanor's heart seized when she saw which one, Richard on their 30th anniversary trip to Italy, laughing in front of the Trevi fountain. The glass had cracked diagonally across his face. "Now look what you've done," she snapped, gathering the broken pieces with trembling hands. But as she removed the photo from the frame to assess the damage, she noticed something behind it, a small note in Richard's neat handwriting. "Remember where we first met, Ellie? There's something waiting there for you. I've always loved your curious heart." Eleanor's breath caught. The note was dated just 2 weeks before his death. "What does this mean?" she asked the cat, who merely twitched his crooked ear. Richard had called her Ellie, only in their most private moments. And where they'd first met, that was the university library in the rare book section. Eleanor had been a literature student. Richard was studying finance but had a secret passion for first editions. For the first time in months, curiosity flickered in Eleanor's mind. What could Richard have left at the library? And why hadn't he simply given it to her directly? The next morning, Eleanor found herself doing something she hadn't done since before the funeral. She showered, carefully styled her silver-streaked hair, and put on a proper outfit, not just another set of shapeless lounge clothes. She even applied a touch of lipstick. "I suppose you'll want to come along?" she told the cat, who was watching her preparations with evident interest. "Well, you can't. Libraries don't allow cats." The cat made a sound that seemed remarkably like disagreement. The Westfield Public Library was a stately brick building where Eleanor had once spent countless happy hours before Richard's death consumed her world. As she climbed the wide stone steps, she felt both a stranger and intimately familiar with the space. "Mrs. Matthews!" The head librarian, Sophia Chen, greeted her with surprise and warmth. "It's been months. How are you?" Eleanor managed a small smile. "I'm taking it day by day, Sophia." "Thank you. We've missed you at the reading group. Your insights on Austen were always so thoughtful." Eleanor nodded, unsure how to explain that books, once her greatest joy, had lost their magic when Richard died. She hesitated, then asked, "I was wondering, did my husband leave anything here? Perhaps in the rare books section?" Sophia's expression shifted to one of understanding. "Actually, yes. He came in about a week before he passed. Asked if we could keep something safe for you. Said you'd know when to come for it." Eleanor's heart pounded as Sophia led her to the staff area and unlocked a drawer in her desk. She handed Eleanor a small wrapped package with "For my Ellie" written on the front in Richard's handwriting. He said it was part of a treasure hunt, I believe he called it. Sophia smiled gently. He seemed quite excited about it. With trembling fingers, Eleanor unwrapped the package. Inside was a small antique silver key and another note. "You found the first clue, my curious girl. Remember our special place where time seemed to stop? The next piece awaits." Are their special place where time seemed to stop? Eleanor knew immediately. The old clock tower in the town square park. They'd had their first kiss there, Richard proposing that they stop time with a kiss just as the clock struck noon. Eleanor thanked Sophia and stepped back out into the autumn sunshine, her mind racing. What was Richard doing? Planning a surprise for her just before his death? And what did this key open? At home, the cat greeted her with an impatient meow, circling her ankles as though asking about her adventure. "He left me clues," Eleanor told the cat, showing him the key. "A treasure hunt of some kind." The cat batted lightly at the key with his paw. The next day, Eleanor visited the clock tower. Behind a loose brick near where they'd shared that first kiss, she found another small package. This one contained a faded photograph of a young Richard standing proudly in front of their first home, a tiny apartment above Mrs. Landingham's flower shop, long since closed, and another note directing her to visit their old neighborhood. Each clue led to another, each location significant in their shared history: the restaurant where he'd proposed, the hospital where Olivia was born, the bench by the lake where they'd spent countless Sunday afternoons. With each discovery, Eleanor felt something shifting inside her, as though Richard was walking beside her through their life together, reminding her of the joy amid her consuming grief. She found herself telling the cat stories each evening as she returned home, tales of young love, of struggles overcome, of the life they'd built together. "He surprised me with tickets to Paris for our 5th anniversary," she told the cat as she stroked his fur. "We could barely afford it, but Richard said some experiences were worth beans and rice for a month." The cat purred, pressing his head against her hand as though encouraging her to continue. 2 weeks into this unusual treasure hunt, Eleanor realized she'd begun to anticipate each day rather than dread it. The fog of grief hadn't lifted entirely, but there were breaks in the clouds now, moments when she could remember Richard with something other than pain. And then there was the cat. She'd started calling him Prospero, Poe, for short, after a discussion she and Richard had once had about The Tempest, being Shakespeare's treasure map of the soul. The name had simply slipped out one evening, and Poe had responded immediately, as though he'd been waiting for her to acknowledge him properly. The final clue led Eleanor back home, to the overgrown rose garden Richard had tended so lovingly. The November chill had stripped the bushes bare, their thorny branches reaching toward the gray sky like supplicants. The greatest treasures are often hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to truly see them. Look where new life begins. Our Eleanor stood in the garden, puzzled. Where new life begins? Her eyes scanned the dormant rose beds, the withered vegetable patch, the tool shed with its peeling paint. Poe had followed her outside and now pawed at a particular spot near the biggest rose bush, Richard's prize, Eleanor, roses, named for their delicate blush-pink blooms that reminded him of her cheeks when they first met. Kneeling in the cold earth, Eleanor began to dig where Poe indicated. About a foot down, her fingers struck something solid, a small metal box, the kind used for safekeeping important documents. The silver key from the library fit perfectly in its lock. Inside, Eleanor found a leather-bound journal, a USB drive, and an envelope with her name written in Richard's handwriting. With shaking hands, she opened the letter. "My dearest Ellie, if you're reading this, 2 things have happened. I've left this world before I was ready. Forgive me for that. And you've found your way through our memories to this moment. I hope the journey has reminded you of the life we built, not just the way it ended. I've kept a secret from you, my love. Not out of deception, but to protect you from my own fears. 5 years ago, I made an investment that seemed like folly at the time. A significant portion of my inheritance from my father went into a startup company created by a brilliant young woman with an idea that I believed could change the world. That company went public 3 months ago. Our investment has grown beyond my wildest expectations. The details are all here. The journal contains the story, the drive holds all the legal documentation. The company's value continues to rise. At last count, our shares were worth just over $11 million. I plan to tell you on our anniversary next month to show you that sometimes the greatest risks bring the greatest rewards. I imagined us discussing what good we might do with this unexpected fortune, the charitable foundation you've always dreamed of starting, perhaps, or funding that literacy program for underserved communities you've talked about for years. I'm sorry I won't be there to see what you choose, but I know whatever it is will be thoughtful, meaningful, and completely you. Remember what I've always said, life is for the living, Ellie. Grief is the price we pay for love, but it shouldn't be the end of your story. There are still chapters to be written, my curious girl. All my love through all my life and beyond. Richard P.S. You might consider getting a cat. The house is too quiet without one, and you have too much love still to give. Eleanor read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. $11 million, a fortune that could fund her wildest dreams for helping others. And Richard had known, somehow he had known, that she would need this treasure hunt, this journey through their shared past, to find her way forward. Poe pressed against her leg, his rumbling purr a comforting vibration against her skin. He knew, Eleanor whispered, stroking the cat's soft fur. Somehow he knew I would find you too. That night, Eleanor sat in Richard's leather chair, intentionally this time, with Poe curled in her lap and Richard's journal open before her. The story of his secret investment unfolded in his familiar handwriting, his initial doubts, his growing belief in the company's mission, his excitement as the value began to rise dramatically. Between entries about financial matters were personal notes, his pride in their daughter's accomplishments, his contentment in their simple daily routines, his enduring love for Eleanor. It was like having conversations with him again, across the divide of death. Eleanor called Olivia the next morning. "Mom? Is everything okay?" "You never call this early," her daughter answered, concern evident in her voice. "Everything is changing," Eleanor said. "I need you to come home, sweetheart. There's something your father left for us to find." And she glanced at Poe, who was watching her intently from his perch on the windowsill. "I'd like you to meet someone." Over the following months, Eleanor's world expanded again. With Olivia's help, she established the Richard Matthews Foundation for Literacy and Education. She rejoined the garden club, her husband's roses blooming again under her careful attention. The library reading group welcomed her back with open arms, and she found she could lose herself in books again, finding new meaning in familiar stories. And through it all, Poe was her constant companion, supervising her gardening efforts from a sunny spot among the roses, curling up beside her during reading group discussions. Sophia had made a special exception for the well-behaved cat, greeting Olivia and her family during their now frequent visits. 1 year after Richard's death, Eleanor sat in the garden surrounded by blooming roses, their sweet scent filling the warm summer air. Poe dozed in her lap as she read through Richard's journal again. The grief wasn't gone. She knew now it never would be entirely, but it had transformed into something she could carry without being crushed by its weight. In its place had grown something unexpected, a new purpose, a reconnection with the world, and the quiet joy of honoring Richard's memory through living fully. "You know," she told Poe, scratching behind his crooked ear, "I think the real fortune wasn't the money at all." Poe opened one copper eye and blinked slowly in what Eleanor had come to recognize as cat agreement. Eleanor gazed at the blue sky above the garden Richard had loved, feeling the warmth of the sun and the weight of the cat in her lap, present, alive, connected to the world in all its pain and beauty. "The real treasure was finding my way back," she whispered. "Back to life," Poe purred. Richard's roses nodded in the gentle breeze, and Eleanor Matthews turned another page, ready for whatever might come next.